Okay guys, let's have a look at some of the parts that we're using with the fuel pressure sensor installation. If you are wanting to see part numbers, please just see the description below. I'll list all the part numbers and where I've purchased the products from. Okay, so we'll have a look at the fuel pressure sensor itself. So you'll see here that we've gone for a Honeywell 150 PSI fuel pressure sensor. Very good quality part. We've also got from EFI Hardware just a standard 3-pin motorsport sensor plug. In order to actually do the adapting of the pressure sensor into the fuel line without having to, drill or tap the fuel rail, what we've done is actually gone for a Speedflow fitting. So this is a Speedflow -6 female to male with a 1/8 NPT port. Now that 1/8 NPT port is what's going to allow us to install the extension kit running off to the pressure sensor. We've also got the ATS Racing top feed fuel rail. Not obviously purchased to do this installation, but part of what we're actually using. We've also got a ProFlow 570 series. This is the 180-degree full flow forged fitting, and that's basically going to join the fuel line to the fuel rail. Then last but not least, we've got the Raceworks pressure sensor extension kit. Very handy piece of kit, this one. Comes with a 450mm braided line. That's a -3 size. And a couple of fittings here. You'll see you've got a -3 to female 1/8 NPT. And we've also got a -3 to 1/8 NPT male. Okay guys, so let's put all this together just so you can visualize how everything will actually piece together once it's installed. So what we'll do is we'll start with the fitting on the end of the rail there. So we've got your -8 to -6. What we're going to do is actually now install the Speedflow fitting. What that's enabling us to do is obviously with that Speedflow fitting is have the 1/8 NPT port there, which is where we will install the extension kit. So that just goes on the end there. Okay, next will be the ProFlow 180-degree full flow fitting. That goes on the end there. And that obviously is where my fuel is going to be coming from the fuel pump through the filter and into the rail. That goes on there. Next thing we need to do is put a 1/8 NPT fitting with the -3 male on the end. So that's just going to go in there. So you'll see that goes on there. That's where our extension kit is going to connect to. Next is the extension line itself. So we're just going to screw that on there. So what you'll see is the extension line just basically comes off that there. So you're getting your fuel pressure reading from there. Now the next thing we want to do is just using the -3 to female, 1/8 NPT female. You can see that that's going to go into the pressure fitting there. So that just goes in there, nice and easy. And then that goes on the other end of your extension kit. So that basically goes on there. And that is what that setup will look like. Okay guys, let's have a look through the parts being used with the oil pressure and oil temp sensor installation, just to give you a bit of an idea of what's going to get installed in the car. So to start with, you'll see that I have a Raceworks 150 PSI pressure sensor. This is used, but it's in perfect working order. So instead of spending any more money, I will continue to use that one. So that's for the oil pressure reading. You'll see that I've also got an EFI Hardware Motorsport Fluid temp sensor. So that's what we'll be using to get the oil temperature reading. We're also going to use a oil pressure T here. So this is something that ProFlow make, very handy. So you'll notice that it's got a 1/8 BSP male on the end that goes into the head. It then has a 1/8 BSP female on the other end, which is where our temp sensor will go into. And then it has the 1/8 NPT port on the side, which is where the Raceworks extension kit will connect to, heading off to the oil pressure sensor. As per the fuel pressure sensor installation, I'm utilizing the Raceworks pressure sensor kit. Alright, let's have a look at the mess of parts that have come out of the engine bay. Obviously, when you're trying to get to the fuel rail, it's a lot easier to remove as much as possible. It just gives you much greater access and allows you to get the job done properly. So you can see here intercooler, intake piping, coil packs, intercooler bracket, injectors, rail, distributor cap, catch can, it's all come out, so it's just going to give me much greater access in that engine bay. Okay, so what you can see in the engine bay is it's all fairly open now. Plenty of space in here to work, which is great. You'll notice that obviously we've got the fuel rail is out, and I've also removed where the factory oil pressure sender switch would have been sitting, and that's where that oil pressure and oil temp will be mounted. So that's where we're at the moment. Let's get stuck into the install and get this all back together. Alright guys, we've started to do the reinstallation of the fuel rail now that we've got the fuel pressure sensor adapter installed on that rail. It is a tight fit, but I'll show you guys where I'm at with that. It's quite a tight fit, but you can see that adapter coming out from in there. And then that adapter is coming out onto the extension line, which I'll obviously, once I get this all installed, figure out a place to mount that sensor. Okay, fuel rail is in. What a pain in the ass that job is. But anyway, injectors and rail are back in. Return line, fuel pressure reg, feed line, it's all there. So you can now see just here is where the extension kit starts and then leads its way up and around. And you can see just up in there is where I've mounted the fuel pressure sensor. Okay guys, here's a quick look at the setup that we've got going for the oil pressure and oil temperature sensors. You'll see that I've run the 1.8 BSP T-piece, not really a T-piece, but that's what they call it, straight out of the head there. And you've got your Raceworks extension kit going off, which will lead off to the pressure sensor once I actually install that, and I'll find somewhere to mount that. And then the temperature sensor is just in the end there. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how that setup works. And I'll keep reassembling the car. Once it's all back together, we'll have another look at that at the end. Okay guys, it's all back together. And this is where we get nervous. So we've got the oil pressure and oil temperature sensors tucked away down in there somewhere. And you'll see that I've then got the oil pressure sensor remotely mounted. Notice the braided line coming up and around there. And you'll see I've mounted that oil pressure sensor just up behind the catch can there. So hopefully that won't leak oil when we start her up. Then over the other side we've got the fuel pressure sensor. Again, you can see the braided line running up, and then you'll see that I've mounted that up on the firewall there. Now I haven't wired that one up yet, but we'll be wiring that up shortly. I think my main concern at the moment is just to make sure that the car's running. So I reckon let's get into it and kick her in the guts. Okay, she seems to be running a little bit rough. Not a huge concern. Last time I had this issue, it was just a loose wire on one of my injectors, but it hasn't been started in a few weeks. So I'll just let it warm up, check for leaks. There we go guys, job's almost done. Bit of electrical work and we'll be good to go. No oil leaks, that's a good thing. No fuel leaks, that's a very good thing. Alright, I've already configured the dashboard and the ECU, but I'll go through that again on film just to show you guys how that looks. Okay, so we've got the ECU plugged into the laptop here, turned on the ignition. Now with the ignition on, what we're able to do is actually connect through to the ECU. Okay, so once you're into the ECU software, what you do is you go up to your settings tab and you want to refer through to your inputs. So you'll see here that I've gone into inputs and input AVI input, analog voltage input. You'll see that I've allocated fuel pressure sensor there. Now what you will also notice is it does not let you edit the values for fuel pressure sensor on this screen. That's because it will actually, once you've added that fuel pressure sensor input, it will actually give you a dedicated tab, which is up here. And this is where you need to configure, depending on the pressure sensor that you install, the voltage values. And on this particular sensor, you'll see half a volt is 0, 4.5 volt is 150 psi, reading in kPa on this ECU. So that's all configured in there and good to go, which means it's now going to be able to send the information from the Haltech ECU over to the Racepak Dash. Okay, so this is the data link software for the Racepak Dash. So what we'll do is let's just go and have a look at the actual setup that we've got in here. It's just acquiring the information now for the display. Okay, so it's read that successfully. So now what we can do is have a look at the display. What you'll see here is that I've configured 4 different dashboards, depending on which one I want to scroll through. And you'll see just here is where I've added EFI fuel pressure. So what that allows me to do is name the value, add a filter, select the channel, etc. And once that's been done, you just send that configuration to your dashboard. And that is it. So once all that's done, what that has then allowed me to do is configure my dash to display as follows. So I've opted for speed, oil pressure, fuel pressure, water temperature and intake temperature on the first display. So this is allowing me to monitor oil pressure, fuel pressure, water temp, intake temp, speed and RPM. But I can, using these buttons that I've installed on the dash just here, scroll through and look at other displays that I have configured. So this one here allows me to see my intake temp, water temp, E85 percentage and also boost. You'll see here I've got my odometer and trip readings, and then some other bits and pieces that I don't really use, such as throttle position, ignition timing, voltage, etc. But job is done and successful. We have fuel pressure, we have oil pressure, everything's working, nothing's leaking. It's a good day.